Welcome. Today I'm going to give you an optional assignment for learning to manipulate color and gouache more skillfully. This is optional. You don't have to do this. It's nice if you want to watch the video, great. But if after you see this assignment you don't want to do it, that's fine. And if you don't even want to play this video, that's also fine. Okay, optional assignment. This one is taken from Color, a workshop for artists and designers by David Horning. And if you bought this book or you want to buy this book, you might have trouble finding this exact edition. The newer one has like a greenish cover with abstract pieces of paint on it. Okay, doesn't have. Don't worry, same book inside, just the cover's different. This is a great assignment. This is not only a great assignment for practicing seeing and mixing and interpreting color, but also for learning to paint. And I believe that learning to paint or learning to draw or learning to do anything where you look with your eyes and try to make that thing appear in front of you, so it could be sculpture, for example, is worthwhile because we're training ourselves to be engaged with the world more fully. And so like even if you don't like your paintings, I still think it's worth painting. Does that make sense? One of the things that I think you struggle with as a painter who's learning is what to paint and why to paint it. Now, I find that many people, especially now when everything is a camera, right? Your phone is a camera, it's always with you. Many people work from two-dimensional objects as they paint another two-dimensional object, right? Often called a picture plane. So you take your photograph at the beach and then you go home and you paint. Maybe you don't even take, maybe you're even looking at your actual tiny little cell phone and you're painting a painting of the seashore. That's never going to be as good as if you took your paints down to the beach and sat there. Now, I don't love sitting out in public myself to paint in front of other people. It's kind of awkward feeling. So, but there are many private places one can sit and paint actual objects or actual scenes from. Your window, lots of places. What you paint is not as important as trying to paint things, okay? So, still lives are perfect because they're inside. You can set one up on your table right next to your paint. It's very easy to paint from, and you're going to become a better painter faster if you paint from three-dimensional objects. Plus, I think there's this kind of wonderful experiential thing going on, right? I think that when you paint a drawing or make a drawing from something that's already flat, the translation isn't really happening, right? It's already flat. When you try to paint something that's three-dimensional into a two-dimensional picture plane, that's when things really get interesting. And don't forget that that is where you're going to become the painter that you are, right? Is by trying, in the struggle, by trying to translate these three-dimensional things into a two-dimensional space. That's where your painting becomes your painting, right? So you want to do that. You want to work from three-dimensional objects. Now, you may not want to paint just from a bowl of fruit, right? You maybe don't want anything that conventional. It can be many things. It could be, you could paint from any kind of three-dimensional objects, any kind of still life. It doesn't have to just be conventional kinds of things, although those are great too. Okay, enough about that. I had to kind of move things around here, but I think I'm going to be able to show you how to set this up, this assignment up to paint a color exercise from. So let's change to the other camera angle. Here we go. You should see before you some pieces of paper, a viewfinder, and a glass of water. You're going to need all those things. You're going to need a viewfinder with any luck. There it is. You can make yourself one. You're going to need some pieces of colored paper. Now, I did two things. I painted some with gouache because I wanted them. My colors. I wanted these colors. This is actually more pink than it probably looks. But you could just as easily use paper that you have around the house. You want it to be a solid, this is just like that goldenrod that people put Xerox things on. This one has a map. You want it to be a solid color, right? You don't want something with a pattern. So some solid pieces of colored paper or fabric. Fabric will be okay too. And what you're trying to do is set up a still life where, and don't get too fancy, keep it simple, especially in the beginning, where there's some interesting shapes coming out here, right? And you're thinking, what does she mean shapes? Yeah, wait, I like that. Do you kind of see that? You see how this, what? Oh, well, let me move this down. This is so awkward to try to explain to you on the video. I'm sorry about that. But so let's move this out of the way. What I've got here is, this is sort of abstracted the shapes. It means that they're going to be both easier to paint and more difficult to paint at the same time. And I'll try to explain what I mean by that. I could have this moved it to a different location, right? It could be, let's see, it could be like a corner that's more angular. They're just on there. That's nice too. See that big highlight of real warm yellow in the center? That'd be a nice thing to paint. And you see these other darker colors that are coming from my apron reflecting in there? I'm going to have to record all of that. So this is just a glass of water with 2 pieces of paper, and it's really complicated, right? You don't need it more complicated than this. So don't necessarily add anything else, especially when you're just trying to like experience observation and recording of color. You don't need to get fancy. This is great. Now let's make another one though. Let's make one with a different color and a different glass. Like the water glass doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what water, look at that. Now isn't that great? It doesn't matter what kind of water glass you have. If you have one that has like a pattern in it, it's going to make your shapes even maybe more complicated, which is fine. See how this is making now little triangles of blue in there? It can have more or less water in your glass also. It doesn't need to be all the way full. So, you know, there's room to play around. That's maybe a little too simple, but I don't mind it. Let's try it a little. Whoa, spill water there. Yeah, that's pretty good. So you can change this up. It could be the orange and the goldenrod. It could be this sort of pink color and orange, right? There's lots of things I can do. I kind of like, well, I liked a lot of them, but I really liked these two together for some reason. I'm going to go back to that and kind of put it like that. Now, what am I doing now? I've got this viewfinder. I don't want to paint this whole table full of stuff, right? I just want something that's a nice composition that is going to give me most of the glass of water. So, and this is where I don't know how I'm going to do this because I don't think I can show you how to do this through this thing. I want you to use this viewfinder to pick your view of, oh, look at how dark it makes it. That is not going to work. I want you to use the viewfinder to pick a section of this, right, that's not much bigger than the glass of water and some of the paper. And you don't need to do this whole huge tableau of table, right? So use something like this. Figure out what kind of composition you like. If you want the cup off to the side or part of the cup missing, you know, part of the cup is not in the image. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining that well, but try to use a viewfinder to pick what you're actually going to put on the paper, what you're going to paint. All right, let's say you've done that, and I'm going to leave it with this. And basically, what I'm going to try to do as faithfully as possible is paint on my Bristol board what I see here, right? And what I see is a piece of yellow and a piece of blue, like a little semicircle of the blue-green color. And then I see a lot of dark reflecting in the cup. And then what I can see, and you can't see so well on this side, is a bunch of interesting reflections from the water and the shadow. And I want to paint that as faithfully as possible also. Now, when I say faithfully, I don't necessarily mean photorealistically, right? I want to try to get these things, but if they get distorted or the wrong shape, that's not really going to be an issue for me, right? You're going to do your best to paint this like it looks, and you're probably thinking it's an overwhelming amount of complexity already, but just sort of start somewhere and see where it leads you. I would probably, on my piece of Bristol paper, start with a very hard pencil, just locating a few things, a few lines, like this line. right? The line, that line I would put into my drawing, my underpainting, so to speak, and then I would put some lines that illustrate where the cylinder of the cup is, and then not too much more. You don't want this thing to turn into like a paint by numbers thing where you identify every single shape and draw a pencil line around that. It doesn't need to be that. You don't need all that, right? Then I was starting with painting, and one way to deal with this painting, you don't want paint by numbers. You don't want to say, and I know we just did a project like this where we just filled in shape after shape with different colors, but in a painting, in a good painting, it has not been dealt with like that. They have not identified places that are going to be certain colors and then just filled it in 1, 2, 3. The painting is a living thing, and it's kind of changing as you go along, and it should not be changing piecemeal, right? It should be changing all together. There's clouds going over the skylight, so there's a lot of drastic light change in this video. Sorry about that. You don't want to just say, well, now I'm going to fill in this whole sort of circle, this whole semicircle of this color, right, at one time. You kind of want to like build your painting up in layers, so to speak. So you might come in with a color that's this color, but the paint isn't very thick yet. And you might kind of put it in there in about the places you think it should be. And then you might change to this color and get that about where you want. And then you'd work a little bit in here. And there's going to be some places that are really bright white, which you can come back in with white gouache, or you could leave some of the white of the paper there, right? The real thing that you want to avoid is in kind of painting your painting like a coloring book, where you put everything on it in one that's going to be blue, and then you come in with another with the red, and then a little later you come in with yellow and fill in all the yellow things. You want it to kind of achieve its end finishedness all together, sort of, kind of. Like, I tell you these things, and then I don't really expect you to follow that as a rule either, right? You kind of got to feel your way around it. But let me show you briefly what these paintings look like that other people have done in this. Because for me I'm not going to take the time to demonstrate painting this, because I think it would just take way too long. Do you see how different they all are, right? And they're not, this is kind of, well, you might not know. If you saw this totally out of context, you might not know it was a glass on paper, but I think you would. They are not photorealistic, but they are very lovely. Each one of these is really a lovely study of the effects of reflecting color through the water, right? This one's really lovely, actually, because it's got this big, bold kind of shape around the outside. This one is also really interesting because of its concentric circles. This one has these little pattern of star things that was probably on the glass. This one's really, this is maybe the most realistic looking one, but not necessarily the best one either. Oh, I'll put that in there a little bit. Yeah. There you go. So hopefully this gives you enough to go on so that you can begin this optional, I repeat, optional assignment that you do not have to do. If you have questions about that, or if you start to paint it and think, wow, I don't know what I'm doing, you can ask me, but you probably are doing fine. The other thing is don't necessarily expect to love your first one. It's fine to make a couple of these. I think watch out not to be painting by a plan, right? Like where you go, okay, this is where all the blue goes, and that's where all the yellow goes, and I'm just going to be done in no time. Try not to do that. Try to be responding to each shape as you go. And the reason that I don't really want you to draw too much is, again, that could encourage you to treat your painting as a coloring book assignment. And a painting should be more in flux. It shouldn't just be a drawing that you added color into the spaces of. It should be a painting. The shapes. Here's the big thing about painting. Let me see if I can describe the exact difference between a painting and a drawing. Well, I'm not going to come up with a good one, but let's take these two objects right here. These two pieces of paper. If I were drawing this, I would take, probably, most people would take a pencil or a pen, and they would draw two outlines, the outlines of these two square shapes, right? And then they might draw an outline of my hands holding them or something like that. But what's really happening here? There is no line on the edge of these things, right? They're two intersecting planes. And what makes the line is the change in color, right? There's no line there. And painting can reproduce that. Your brush can make that edge, right, in a way that a drawing kind of can't. And your brush can delineate this edge just by the color just stopping. As I like to think of it as these two colors, these two planes are really crushing into each other. They're ramming into each other in space, right? And your paintbrush can reproduce that exact effect of the two colors coming together, right? It's the kiss, right? They kiss right there. That's what a painter friend of mine calls it. So that's how paintings are, right? Things. I was looking for something square to really give you a good example. Just hold on 1 minute here. There's got to be some. This is a box full of stuff. See this box? If I was drawing this, I would put a line there, right? And I would put a line here, and I would make this sort of outline, and you would kind of know it was a box because basically I'd be drawing it kind of in perspective, right? But with paint, there's a shift in value here. Even though this box is the same color of white paper on both sides, because this side is in shadow and this side is in the light, these are completely different colors, basically. And when you're painting, you want that to just crash right into that edge, right? You don't want a line in between there. If you put a line in between there, it looks like a cartoon. You know, it doesn't look as much like a painting. And why do you need it to look like a painting? You want it to look like a painting because it can look like a painting. It doesn't need to look like a drawing. It's a painting. You have all this whole new world of planes and how you reproduce them, how you represent them on your picture plane. It can be completely different than the way you would in a drawing. All right, that's all for your optional assignment. Until next time.